Okay, we are okay.
We'd like to welcome everyone to the Ojai Unified School District Board meeting. Great to have you here. If you could please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, to begin with, are there any additions or modifications to the agenda that we need to consider?
I have none.
I don't believe there are. So we'll ask the board to approve the agenda as is. If we could get a motion.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wonderful. And then moving on to the minutes.
Just one addition, and Ms. Smith will send it out to the board. Everything, as far as we know, was accurate, except we had a couple of ministerial things where we had to get the right person as a second.
Right.
2 seconds actually were Mrs. Weil and not Mr. Whipple. So we'll change that. Okay. Other than that...
Well, who lost the second?
No, the seconds. The seconds.
Apparently my JW looks a lot like my TW.
Very good. All right, with those modifications, can we get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wonderful. And now we're up for our student representative report.
So this week at Nordhoff, we'll be testing for the juniors. They'll be testing in their history classes on the double days. We're also having our senior days, where seniors get to participate in a career fair put on by the Rotary Club. They have panoramic picture, the Battle of the Seniors, and some barbecues and some pancake breakfasts. Today we got dance lessons, which was interesting but super fun. So, and we also got the opportunity to go to the elementary schools that we went to and build bottle rockets with the 6th graders. Our spring rally will take place on Friday, May 1st. At this rally, we plan to honor our spring sports, but instead of focusing really on the sports, this time we're going to focus more on the arts and recognize the several performing arts like dance, music, drama, as well as video productions. Prom finally has a date, which is scheduled Saturday, May 2nd at the Limonera Ranch in Santa Paula from 7:30 to 11. The theme is Moonlight in the Orchards. We know it will be a magical event. It's completely outdoors, so that'll be different. The Red Cross Blood Drive is scheduled for Tuesday, May 5th. That's what's going on at Nora.
Fantastic.
Why were you getting dance lessons?
Well, Bayless.
That would be the principal thing.
Yes, Dr. Bayless just had the idea of maybe, it was originally kind of going to be possibly a whole school activity, but we decided to just incorporate it into the senior week this year, so it went really well. We had instructors come and it was super fun. Everybody got really into it, which was cool. So.
Was it dance for like the prom dance or?
Kind of contributing to that, but it was just basic steps to swing, so yeah.
Remains to be seen as to whether it could be used at the prom.
Exactly. It was made to be used at the prom, but so.
Great. Any other questions, comments for our student representative? Great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
You're
you
welcome
guys
to
for having
stay
me.
or go.
I'm gonna go.
All right.
I got soccer.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Go Rangers.
Go Rangers.
All right, terrific. And now for public comments, Linda Davis.
That's me.
Great. Yeah, come on up here. And I think we do 3 minutes. Yep.
Well, I practiced, so I'm
Perfect.
either going to be right at 2 minutes, a little less, or a little tiny bit more. My name is Linda Davis. I'm here with Pat Jones. We are from the Ojai Peddlers Fair. I've been with the fair for 5 years. Pat has been with it for 35 years. We are both here representing the vendors. We had the show last weekend here at the Chaparral Auditorium. And we met and spoke with them regarding the requirement that they have vendor insurance starting in July. None of the vendors are willing to purchase the insurance. They're mostly senior citizens on a fixed income. They show at other venues where this insurance is not required. So I'm here today to ask that you reconsider your decision. I'm here to question why you're requiring it. We don't sell food. Hopefully nobody's going to swallow Pat's jewelry. I'm a tile and woodworker myself. And then secondly, how do you plan on enforcing it? If you're going to require Pat to ask every new vendor for proof of that insurance, I think that's asking a great deal. Our history with the PTO, not with the board,
Miramonte.
is a little,
Miramonte PTO.
I'm sorry?
Miramonte PTO.
Yeah, Miramonte
Yes,
PTO,
okay.
thank you.
Okay, sure.
I don't hear really well either.
That's okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
Is a little iffy. Catherine White is Pat's resource, and when Pat gets flustered, she returns to me. And the last issue we had was access to the kitchen, to the Chaparral Auditorium, which of course we use to go in and out of, to load and unload, but we don't use the facilities of the kitchen. So I contested that. I believe I ended up writing to Kathy White at one point. I never heard back from anyone, but Pat informed me from Catherine White that we could have access to the kitchen. So that's why I'm here. Pat is going to distribute to you folders which everyone's name on it, except Kathy, because I didn't know you would be here. In the folder you will find a postcard that shows the old banner that used to go across Main Street in Ojai, advertising the Peddler's Fair. You will find my business card and Pat's business card. And most particularly, you will find a copy of a letter to the editors of the Ventura Star and Ojai Valley News papers, which I plan to submit like a spoiled child if I don't get my way. Yeah, not too bad.
You have been practicing. Thank you very much for your input.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, can I ask one question?
Yes.
Absolutely.
How much is the vendor's insurance?
About $1,000 a year.
And what does it cover?
That's what I'd like to know. You know, why do we need it? We don't need liability because the school district is in charge of that through the Chaparral High School auditorium. In California, it is required of farmers who attend markets because
vendor's
people eat their food and could get sick. Catherine White made the comment to me last year that if anybody were to eat Pat's Amish bread and get sick, hello, she can just stop making the bread. I don't see it, to answer your question, Ms. Taylor. I just don't get it. And what makes me even more bristly is that no other no other venue that we all go to. I go to a farmer's market in Camarillo where I live. I go to the weekend canning shows at the fairgrounds. They don't require vendor insurance.
May I ask just one question?
You bet.
In all of these places you go,
Yes,
is any other one a public sector organization?
public sector
Like a school.
Like
organization.
a school district or a
Yes,
community
Parks and-
college? Community college?
Parks and Recreation of Camarillo.
Okay.
They just started a new farmer's market last summer, and it has a crafter
I'd be
area.
interested, if you could send me a list of those type of organizations, I'd like to see that.
Absolutely,
That'd be
sir.
helpful. Okay, great, thanks.
Be happy to.
Okay.
Through the school district or?
Yeah, just send them to me.
Or send it
I'm
to...
right on the website, you can't miss me.
That's right, you're all
We can send
there.
it to Kathy.
All right, I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very
I
much.
have a question too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the relationship between Miramonte's PTO and the fair, how does it work? Do you guys contribute something to the PTO, or do they contribute something to you, or is it just a
We
mutual?
pay booth rent,
You pay booth rent.
$30, each person pays 30. Used to be 45, and somehow it got reduced to 30
Per month, per year,
per fair, and the fair is once a month. And we turn that over to you, in return for which we are supposed to get advertising, support, helpers. I've been with the fair 5 years, I've seen none of that. And if I'm lucky, if we're lucky, we have that little banner at the side of the tree on the way to, and for 2 months running, 3 months ago it wasn't there. Pat asked about it and was told an 80-some-year-old lady was responsible for putting the banner up. I said, fine, I'll put it up, I'm not 80 years old. So, you know, we're tender on this subject. And I know that the pecking order is to go to Catherine White first, so I had emailed her, let her know we would be here today. So,
Okay.
it's a wonderful fair.
Thank you.
And 35 years, come on. That's history. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. We also have a public comment from William Ulrich.
Good evening.
487 Gridley Road. A general question, I haven't seen, perhaps I missed somehow, any status update on the district's generation of the updated master plan. So it's, my comment is that we're, at this point, considering the essential nature of the document, I've had some exchange of emails with board members. So really, I'm just, that was, if I may consolidate the comment, was we're working on it. But at this point, I'd like to, if possible, for myself as well as the public, know what the status of it is.
Maybe we should discuss it on the agenda.
And you may want to put that on the
Sure,
future agenda item.
there is an agenda item tonight, we can talk about it then.
In that case, I would suggest that it be an ongoing, every meeting sort of agenda item, just because it being an essential document and also something that's going to take a while to address perhaps, perhaps not, but that's my sense. So, that's thank you. Any questions?
Thanks for your comment.
William, just so you know, the agenda item we're talking about is 7.5.4. So we'll be talking about it at that point.
Swell, thank you.
Thanks. Any other public comments? We will move on then to the introduction of our new Assistant Superintendent, Andrew Cantwell. It's wonderful to have you here. We're really excited about your enthusiasm and experience. And we've received information about you, and we've also received the agreement. And we're being asked as a board to appoint you as the Assistant Superintendent, Business and Administrative Services, effective May 18th. Are there any comments, questions from the board at this point?
Fabulous. I'm excited.
And we've had a chance, Andy's had a chance in the last hour plus to speak to some of his colleagues upcoming and have a chance to meet with the board briefly. I've had a chance to tell the entire staff about him, so I've sent out his resume, and I'm excited to have him come to succeed an outstanding Assistant Superintendent for Business and Administrative Services in Danny Pusteri. Andy brings a different background. Danny was a CPA. Andy has both an MBA and a law degree from Washington University in St. Louis. undergrad, UCLA, and he's a Ventura County person growing up in Moore Park. So we welcome you back from those northern cities of San Ynez and Santa Barbara. It's great to have you, and if you'd like to just step to the podium and share with us how you're feeling about all this.
Sure. Well, thank you, Hank. I did just want to take this opportunity to, again, thank the board for this opportunity and really express to the public as well just my real excitement and gratitude for this opportunity. I've shared a little bit already in the past hour and a half, as Hank said, but my wife and I weren't really looking for this sort of opportunity at this time in my career. But when I saw OHI come up, it was just too tempting and too great of an opportunity to pass up. I have had an opportunity to work at Moore Park Unified, both in the classroom as well as at the district level. Spent a little bit of time up at CDE, and then most recently I've been with the county office in Santa Barbara. But my goal was always try to get to this type of position, and never thought the opportunity would arise to be able to be in this community. My wife and I grew up in Moore Park, and so we had track meets up here. I was an assistant basketball coach at Moore Park High School, but I will trade in the green and gold for the blue and gold. And my wife and I have a 19-month-old son and a baby girl on the way, and so we are excited to raise our family in this community. We have already found a home, and so we're looking forward to moving down. I'll warn you guys that my son's first word was doggy, second word was dada, and before he could do anything else, he learned how to properly raise his hand for a touchdown at the appropriate time. So we will be at the Nordhoff football games coming up in the fall. So we're very excited for this opportunity, both for myself and my family. So I just really want to thank you, thank this community, and thank the district, and just express how excited I am for being able to work with each of you.
Do whatever you want.
Great. Well, the way I look at it, not only are we getting a great new assistant superintendent, but we're getting a great new family here in our community. So it's a win-win for us. And so that's great. I'm very enthusiastic about it.
So I enthusiastically recommend his appointment to the board.
Can I, just for the community, because I was new to this whole process, and Hank, you were very helpful to me last night, describing how this process happened, and it's very, I don't know, maybe I should let you do it, but it's very much the way it's handled for, hiring a principal and the dean of students, and that Hank brings together, asks for recommendations, and I really appreciate that you requested that some board members be sort of part of that process.
Well, actually, right, thanks, Jane. We had, for this part of the process, Linda and Mike represented the board. We had Laura Meisch representing the business part of the community, and Chuck Crawford, who's back in the corner, representing the CSEA, and Martha Ditchfield representing the teachers. And we had two principals, Greg Bayless and Cheryl Knox. I chaired the committee. And that's just how we hire leaders. We always do that. Not every time are board members involved, but for this particular position, because at the June 2nd board meeting, Andy will be sitting over there, because as you know, there's a huge amount of interaction between the assistant superintendent and the board. So thanks, and that is what we do, and kept the rest of the board members informed about the evolution of the appointment, and I'm just super excited to have him here.
I move that we appoint Andrew Cantwell to be the assistant superintendent.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, none
Welcome.
opposed.
Congratulations.
And I promise Andy that I get him on the road back to his 7-month pregnant wife.
It's unanimous, and we're excited because we were anticipating that we might have quite a long break between having assistant superintendents, and we really appreciate your willingness to jump right in.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Take care.
Right, drive safe. Okay. Moving on to 7.1.1, in recognition of Teacher Appreciation Week and the Day of the Teacher, we're asked to approve this annual resolution honoring our teachers. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll have a motion to approve. Teacher appreciation.
I'll second that one.
Wonderful. All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. And then 7.1.2, there've been some changes in what we were
Right.
doing on this since
Really
we
positive
started,
changes.
so-
First of all, before we get to that, let me just go back to 1.1 for a minute. The day of the teacher is actually our next board meeting. So I thought, rather than sort of do it retroactively by 7 or 8 hours, I thought we'd get ahead of it by a couple of weeks, so thank you for that. Actually, I'm very pleased, even though this is it's not a positive agenda item in its content generally, because we are not able to rehire at this moment every teacher who received a letter back before March 15th. But we're getting there. We're getting very close. So as you can see from the attached material, bless you, the resolution named 5 employees by their identification number. And at this juncture, I can say, as I shared with the board earlier today, we know that I can remove from this list, so I'm recommending an amended list that you would approve, recommending the first, third, and fifth teachers coming off the list. And so now all we have to address, and we're going to continue to try to address it, are 2 1/5 reductions from teachers for whom we don't exactly have the right number of sections in the master schedule. So we're getting very, very close to a 100% return of everybody who wants to return. I'll be able to report to you at the June 2nd meeting, because it's a day after the deadline for rescission of any teachers who would like to access the early retirement incentive, which you approved a couple of months ago. I'll give you a full report on that and how it affects the hiring of teachers for next year. But at this juncture, it appears that we will be hiring elementary teachers.
Oh, that's
I
exciting.
would say, at least it appears that way. Okay, so we cover everybody for whom we had to, or to whom we had to give a letter, and I'm thinking that we may be hiring. At the secondary level, I'm not sure. So I recommend your approval of this resolution with the removal of the first, third, and fifth teachers on the list.
Move approval of the amended list.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Great, none opposed. I think it's worth noting that we wish we didn't have to deal with this at all.
Yeah.
But we're hopeful we're most of the way there. We're hopeful
We're 97, 8% of the way there.
in a month, hopefully we can get 100%.
You bet.
So, great. Moving on to 7.3.1. We've been looking forward to our presentation from Nordoff on the math program. The board has had an opportunity to look at the textbooks this week, and
Well, my only context for the textbook and everything else, first of all, Kim, you look ravishing in your new dress. I like that. Kim, you look nice in the dress.
Oh, thank you.
Pretty dress. It's a pretty dress. And so do you, Becky, and Dave, you look ravishing in your track jacket. And Renee, you always look great. So everybody except, as Kendall is...
Kendall will be here.
She coming? Okay, all right. So as Kevin always says, for those in the audience, whoever in the audience, the page that introduces this agenda item named all the people whom I just identified. Kim, who's the Nordoff Dean of Academic Services, Mathematics Chair, Renee Nicau, and then we have 3 teachers, 2 are here, Becky Berry and Dave Sedham, and Kendall Neely on her way. And I'm going to turn this over to Kim in about 30 seconds, but I would just say to you that the amount of work that it took to get to the point where we were a year ago was significant. So I'm interested to hear the discussion of year 1, that is Math 1, and then how it transits to Math 2, and that's what tonight's about. And I'm positive that we are going to be hearing not long from now about how we get to year 3 and what the implications of that, but that's not for tonight. Okay? Again, it's all yours.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us. Those of you who were part of the board last year had a very detailed presentation. And so rather than to reiterate so much of what we've done before, I saved just a few slides just to give you a little taste of the work that was presented a year ago. So one thing I can tell you is this has been a significant collaborative effort on the part of the department. I've been very pleased to work with them, and we have definitely seen I would just say the benefit as not only as professionals in terms of working with them as teachers, but also in terms of the shift in learning for students. And so I think what's really exciting, if I can kind of frame this for you, is that sense of excitement that we're starting to see on the real sense of what's math really for. And so I'm excited about that from that perspective, making math meaningful. So, okay, well, I guess it won't. Well, yeah, would you? Thank you so much. So anyhow, just to make sure we're all up to speed, a brief overview. Integrated math, it is exactly what it says it is. It's taking different elements from the otherwise divided elements of math curriculum and integrating them together. And so we're not doing any fuzzy math or any weird math. What we're doing is giving a different context for mathematics. Similar to how math is taught in other countries, in countries where students have higher levels of performance than they have typically had in our more traditional pathway. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this was a slide that was a very effective tool for us last year. We've actually used this within documentation we've shared with parents. But just to help people understand, because a good number of parents are in my generation, and when I went to high school, I took Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. And that's sort of how we know math. And we know math in those sorts of procedural ways, meaning that, gosh, if my child needs help, I'm going to open up the book and look at, here's the problem that looks just like the one I used to do, and can I help you kind of find the pattern? And ultimately, when we now look at the shift that we're making in our pilot, we are moving to that integrated pathway. So it's not that these subjects aren't taught, they're just packaged differently and in a more meaningful manner. So the exciting thing is that we've been part of this overall transition, and we're not alone. Our teachers have worked, in fact, with Moore Park Unified directly. We actually have training from Jim Short where Moore Park teachers come and work with our staff. So there's been an opportunity for collaboration outside of our school, which I think is really healthy. But you can see a number of other districts are moving this way, and the University of California has been very welcoming of coursework that follows the integrated pathway. So it's been a clear communication from them at curriculum-based presentations for people who have my types of dots. So if you will, at this point, I want to go ahead and transition this over right now and invite up our teachers. So we have Becky Perry as well as Dave Sutto, and they're going to tell you a bit about their experience working with students.
Okay, I know this is supposed to be short, so I'm going to try to keep it brief, but it's really, this new textbook is what we're talking about. The integrated program can be taught through a variety of textbooks. So right now, I think what our main focus is this IMP textbook that we're teaching them. And a lot of good stuff is coming out of this, a lot of exciting, I mean, as much as the kids are learning, I think we're learning as well, and kind of getting excited again about math. As far as, they are learning to use the concepts rather than just memorize the concepts. It's a new way of thinking because they're strategizing. They're not just trying to memorize. They're not just trying to figure out how to solve an equation, not just how to use a formula, but when to use it, why we use it, etc. And the other part that's different is struggling. Not struggling in that, I can't remember how to solve that equation, but struggling in learning how to think. That's what they're struggling with, is I really have to work at this problem, and that's okay. To understand that, that's how we learn stuff. And we struggle with it, we try, we give a lot of effort, and they have to think. And that's a part that is new and exciting for me because they're not just spewing out information anymore. It's they have to think about stuff and show that they understand and elaborate and put it out in a contextual manner. So we're excited. Some of them are excited.
So this here is a really exciting slide because you can really see the students in action and see the teamwork and collaboration that's happening in the classroom. It's a lot less independent work than previous courses. This is focused really on group work and collaboration amongst their peers, their classmates. And you can also see the use of technology in the classroom. We've been very fortunate to have purchased a lot of graphing calculators this year, which is really great for a lot of ninth graders to be able to be introduced to them at such an early age and really get hands-on experience using those calculators.
We took some, the students, I don't know if you guys have heard of our ranger responses, where the kids in every class every week are supposed to give some kind of a ranger response to a quote. So one of our responses was regarding this program, and to see how they were feeling about it, because it's a new program, and they aren't the most upfront people. They don't always like to talk about stuff, so this was a nice opportunity to get some feedback from them. And it was nice to see that some of them were actually, they're understanding why we're using the concepts, not just memorizing the concepts. It says here, it makes more sense than trying to figure out how many miles you can buy with $500. But learn how to apply the concepts, which is what's the most important part. But I think also what we saw was there's still some pushback. The kids still want more notes. They still want more procedural. Some of them do not want to think, and they mentioned it in their testimonials. But that just shows me more that's what we need to do, really.
So these are just more testimonials here, and of course the first comment that's highlighted is that the hands-on interactive learning, which I think was really demonstrated through the use of the calculators and also through our units that we're working with. For example, in year 1 we have a unit called Pit and the Pendulum, which is an excerpt from Edgar Allan Poe and of his short stories, but the students actually get to build pendulums and test the periods and measure them. And we're doing another unit called Shadows, where students are creating shadows and measuring all the different variables that are involved with that. So that's really exciting. And then as Dave had mentioned, one of the not so positive things that students are seeing is that we're not taking notes anymore like they did last year. So they have a hard time because they don't have a lot to reference when they go home and they're asked to do this work on their own. So that is something that we are planning to work on for in the future and next year, is really how to help the students and provide more guided notes so they have a little bit more assistance next year.
Thank you. Feel free to stay close by.
All right, so
Can we just ask you a quick question? Most of the feedback was great, and I'm excited about students are going to have a hard time saying, I'm never going to use this again, because it's all about how to use it. But on the notes issue, have they been told not to take notes, or what's the deal there?
The program depends more on them taking their own notes. And we're going to talk about this later, but I'm working on a way to implement it more myself, because I feel that they still need a little bit more guidance in that area.
And just to let you know, I piloted some of the units in my pre-calculus, the math analysis course, and what I did do with them is summarize, extracting what did they learn, what is the generalizations, and they took it down as notes. So they appreciated that, so everything was on one sheet. So that's another way we can start incorporating.
There's opportunities
Yeah.
throughout the curriculum, and it asks them questions and to write down their thoughts and to write down what they learned. It's just that they're not there yet. And so they need a bit more guidance from us.
And I think there's a spectrum. If you think about it, for example, when I consider my math classes growing up, or what I saw, my own child was in the traditional pathway, my oldest. You'd open up the book and there's the formula. And we all know in real life, we don't get the formula. We have to often figure out, gosh, I see this part and I see this part, and how do they go together? And that's really what IMP is really good at. So I think there's a happy medium somewhere in between, and I ultimately can envision that they'll have some adapted work within the curriculum to be able to help support those kids. But I think that's a really reasonable set of information from students that we want to listen to without spoon feeding them the formula on the front end. I like what Renee's mentioning, like, hey, we're working through it, but then we're going to guide you through thinking, how did you do that? Let's document that so we can use that thinking for whatever test is coming.
And it's interesting, I go back and forth between a unit to test it out, and I told them, you know, this is going to be an experiment to see. You obviously didn't get probability and combinatorics the traditional way last year, let's try this. And throughout my class, I would hear, and Dave Munson would hear, oh, so that's how they got that formula. I get it, I see it clearly now, and so I wouldn't give them the formulas. I said, well, if you don't remember it from last year, let's try this new approach. And they were really very open to it, and unfortunately, they haven't rewritten some of the later units, so I have to go back to the traditional. First thing out of the kid's mouth, or you talk too much. So, you know, it's that balance in between dissemination and having them work together.
So we'll go ahead and transition and tell you a little bit about the other element that we incorporated into our work this year. We felt that it would be essential for our team to have a united front with parents so that we could share information, because I know as a mom, moms and dads, they want to be able to help their kids. And I could envision that first week of school, students come home, they've got a new book, seems a little scary, what am I going to do? And so the third day of school, we had an integrated math parent night. In fact, Kevin came to that. And we had, gosh, I think over 100 people there, right around 100, and actually Hank was there as well. And we really received a lot of guidance about how to set up that night from Jim Short from Ventura County Office of Education. He's been an integral part of the work that we've done this year, and we'll talk more about him later. We also established online textbook access for all students, but we also created an opportunity that if a student needed a textbook, that they could go and check one out from the library. So we wanted to make sure that access was completely clear. We also have classroom sets. We actually still have classroom sets in every Math 1 classroom. So there's a textbook in the room, the textbook students can have at home, and if they have an online portal to be able to do that, that they could do so. And then at Spring Showcase, we are planning to do a follow-up, something where students actually present their work. That's really the focus of Spring Showcase, is for students to share what they do. And really this curriculum lends itself so well, and I've had the opportunity to watch students get up and solve the problem of the week and to actually present what they've written, their formal written documents, and they're different. Every student's a little bit different. So, is there a question?
No,
We just realized that we're still not on TV.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It'll be on tape. It'll be on tape. It'll be on tape.
It's being recorded, so.
That's okay. No problem. No problem.
They'll broadcast it twice as many times later.
I was just checking.
So anyhow, I'm going to invite Renee up here because I know she has a lot to say about how valuable Jim Short's guidance has been for us this year.
Well, this curriculum has been around since the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, so it's not a new curriculum. And Jim Short worked in the Wainimi High School in the Oxnard Unified School District, and he was one of the first teachers to pilot this text out of the Berkeley area. And so going over the curriculum with him, our questions, how to modify, have been really invaluable. He's been in all 3 of our classes when we're doing the IMP units. He takes notes, he gives us feedback, we discuss what could we have done better, what's the better structure, we're struggling with this aspect, how can we change it, how do you make it better? And just his experience has been really invaluable to us. You know, you'll see in a different slide that the textbook doesn't offer a lot of assessment pieces. We're asked to find them on our own or develop them, and he's been very good at giving us cues on what to do. And the workshops that we take at VCOE have been really invaluable also.
We also set things up so that we had support for students on the front end. That was another important piece. You'll notice up there we actually have a photograph of one of our lead integrated math peer tutors, Atticus Reyes, who's a senior and a very strong math student himself. We actually trained a group of 8 peer tutors. Most of them work within classrooms, but a few of them also work in the after-school setting with Francie Nelson. We have a group twice a week, funded by a donation from Norwalk Parent Association. So that's been a very valuable tool. We're also going to be looking at some ways we can improve how we can use that resource. We feel like we need to do that for next year. So I'm going to turn this over to our teachers because they're going to talk a little bit about the positives. They've already mentioned some of those positives and those areas of concern. So maybe just the ones that we haven't touched on yet.
One of the things that I wanted to point out is I have several students that are enjoying this, but in particular, the student that is in the Math 2, we're testing that one out a little bit, and she struggled for several years, and she's come to me on several occasions. I really like the way this is presented, and it makes so much more sense. And it's really good to feel like, okay, here's a kid that has had a lot of struggle and is having some success in understanding it and enjoying it a little bit. And I have another student who's in my Camille Farger in my Math 1 class who definitely struggles every single day, but she puts a whole lot of effort in and she's enjoying it. And her mom has talked to me several times about how much she's enjoying this and she isn't so stressed, and it's just nice to see that the kids that can struggle can really get through this, with the effort, if you put in the effort.
Math is meaningful.
Yeah.
And in terms of the positives, I think I would just pretty much have to second what Dave said. It's really the students who previously have not identified themselves as a strong math student are the students that I think are enjoying this the most and finding the most success and enjoyment out of this, because they're the ones that are really doing well and going far with this new curriculum. So it's really exciting to see. In terms of the areas to improve, the need to implement after-school tutoring accountability early in the year is something that I think we recognize as being really important. We've done a good job with that as time has passed so far this year, but next year I think we really need to be proactive about making sure that happens right at the beginning of the year and letting our parents know that we think your son or daughter would really benefit from after-school tutoring, and we're recommending that they participate in such.
In the other area, what I wanted to highlight to improve is something we already talked about. We talked about, feel like there's more of a need for some structured note-taking, but also, they don't provide a whole lot in terms of quizzes and stuff like that. So that's something that, over the summer, we definitely want to work on improving and adding more in here and there. And I think a little bit more procedural work, so they can have a little bit more repetition with some things, just so they feel a little more comfortable, so it's not so drastic of a change. I think that's something we're also going to be working on implementing.
Before you go on, because there is a lot of words in these books and not a lot of numbers. And so how does the school address sort of that reading comprehension problem? Does the working in groups help, or?
We do definitely work in groups, pairs. It's not always like groups of 4. Sometimes it's 2 people, sometimes it's 3 people, and occasionally it's 4 people as well. But reading it out loud,
helps.
I mean, life is words, it's not numbers. You're not going to be given, here's a bunch of numbers, now solve the equation. You're going to be giving a situation that comes out from words. And, that's what they need to be able to do. And so, I think it's important that we encourage that, and, that's real life.
And as time has passed, just real fast, the students are becoming a lot more confident when they open the book and see the next activity, because they now know what to do and what's expected of them. In the beginning of the year, I think we had a lot of hesitation from the students because they saw words and not numbers. But now that they're understanding the curriculum and what's expected of them, they're a lot more willing to work with what's presented to them.
What's interesting about that question, and it sort of cuts across, I would say, the entire concept of Common Core, is that we no longer can learn in discrete disciplines, right? So in order to be an effective math student, you have to be an effective reader. And the same thing happens in science. Back in our days, right? You walked into a math classroom and you didn't have to worry about writing a sentence. Now we're writing all over, we're reading all over, And it's both exciting and frustrating, right? Because if you're not a strong reader, you can, unless you have a way to work with teachers like Becky and Kendall here. Welcome, Kendall. Good to see you. Kendall and Dave and Renee. You need help. You need help to figure out what to do, because you have to read it to know how to do it. It's not just, like you were saying, plug a formula in and one number flows from it, right? That's not the way it works.
Along those lines, I'm curious as to how big are the classes? Are they a different size from what they had been? And is there increased sort of need for interacting with individual students, do you find? And if so, do you feel like you have enough resources to do the job?
The class sizes are about the same. They've been growing over the years because of our population. But what we have this year, we talked about a little bit, was these peer tutors. And that's really helped a lot because they can roam around the classroom, you can add additional support, and it's made quite a difference.
So it's an elective for the peer tutor?
It is an elective. The student receives elective credit, but they also have the opportunity to help after school for community service hours or in a paid capacity. It's at their option, so we work on that with them. But the thing I'll mention about class size, we tried very hard. It was our kind of #1 priority to try to keep the class sizes to 32, but class balancing is usually what played a role in, gosh, if the class was over 32, it had less to do with the overall number and more to do with, gosh, I can't make it so that we have the exact right number. With the freshmen, though, they tend to have a little bit more flexible schedules, so it'll be interesting as we move through Math 2 and Math 3 as students have a little bit more unique schedule needs. Can we really preserve that? Hopefully we can.
When you say balancing, are you talking within the class aptitudes?
Right. No, class balancing in terms of class size numbers. So let's say, we have 5 sections of integrated math, and on paper we can start out with them being at 32 each, but when schedule conflicts are being worked on by counselors, sometimes those don't always actually stay in that.
There's always a range, right?
There's a range.
2 to 4 from the median.
Has anyone followed yet the outcomes in some other district, presumably that's been on Common Core longer than we have, in terms of the SAT scores and the other sort of standardized scores resulting from a Common Core background as opposed to the traditional?
Well, there have been, I know on, when it used to be out of Key Curriculum Press, they did from this particular text, maybe it's differently arranged, but they do have increased SAT scores, reasoning scores. This was approved by UCs way back in the 92 years. So.
Yeah, and this idea actually came before Common Core. I mean, I know
this was way before.
Thatcher's been doing Math 1, 2, 3, 4 for 10 or 12 years.
But when you say it's approved by the UCs, it's approved as curriculum to give them the credits, but then they're all taking the same standardized tests.
Yes.
And some will have been, so-called trained on regular old school math, and some will be on this.
I think
and you're saying
reasoning skills is what shows. Who is it? Bill Nye the Science Guy. If you've ever watched his lectures, I have at National Teachers Conferences for Science, because I also teach chemistry at times. If we teach the kids to think, I don't care what assessment you put in front of them, they're going to be able to reason it out. And that shows over and over and over again. I took a class from Joe Bowler over the web from Stanford. They'd kill me if I said UC Stanford.
The UC people would kill you.
But Stanford, and she had a lot of people that went through this particular program who are very well aptitude-wise in mathematics. Mathematics is not just what we've been doing traditionally in the United States, where it's just formula after, procedure. There's a problem. How do you think it through? Math is about thinking, reasoning, not what we've been doing. And if they're able to do that, they perform well, because they have those skills to reason out, okay, what is this question asking me?
But in general, it's still too early. right? Because I mean,
Well, and do keep in mind that SAT has changed over time. So even though this curriculum existed with Key Curriculum Press originally, the SAT of that era is not the SAT of this era. So I'm sure that there will be research going. But you should know, every district in California, when it comes to math, the feedback we've heard is that we're all in this boat of trying to find the right thing, trying to ensure that it is good for students, and that we have the support for teachers. So I think there's a lot that remains to be seen.
Sorry for monopolizing, but do you find it harder in this environment to satisfy the high achievers?
I don't think so. I think you probably engage them more because it's meaningful. I think that probably the child who's really inclined to say, I love math because I can find the answer really fast, like my 7th grade child, one of them, she definitely is that child. But now she's starting to realize, oh yeah, math is fun because you can get what it means, not just how to solve it quickly. And so I think that the meaning factor is really the important element here. I mean, I know for me, and I'll just speak with you quite clearly, I was working on how do you set up testing for, X number of students for the upcoming CASP test, and we were laughing that it's a Common Core problem. And that, it took me like 5 people to work on it over the last several days, and so it's real life. It's real life, and so that really helped me to kind of laugh at it also, but it's real. So.
Just kind of an extension on that and follow up, do we know what the universities are doing now? Because as far as I know, they're still teaching algebra and calculus and geometry, and now they're going to be getting all these kids who just know how to solve problems.
They're still learning the same concepts.
The concepts, but do they know which is
They're learning how to
which?
solve problems, yes, but they're still learning how to use those concepts to solve problems. So they're still getting the concepts.
And the standards are just packaged in a different manner. So it's not that they aren't learning the content that they would have learned or the skills, they're just learning them in a different way. And so I get what you're saying. There might be some concern, gosh, if an incoming student coming from an integrated pathway is going to jump into a university system that doesn't have that, will they be okay? And I actually think they'll be just fine. Because ultimately they'll have the meaning, they'll have the reference. And truthfully, a good number of the students who really will go on into math and science, they're going to be your highest achieving students. Your student who tests well with their university entrance tests or their CASP test, perhaps, as juniors, may not necessarily need to take more math when they get to the university. So I think it depends on their major and what they're going to do.
I just have a question for Renee. When you go to these math conferences statewide, so let's talk about the class of 2019. All right, so when the class of 2019 is
That's the incoming group of
right, when they're incoming freshmen, what percentage in California, let's say in California, what percentage of that incoming class do you think will have experienced integrated math?
It depends, it depends on what the districts are doing.
Right, but just in general, from what you sense, what would you?
That's quite a few. I would say, I don't know percentage-wise, that's.
I think we could probably answer that more readily within about 6 months.
Okay.
The University of California has debuted a new portal where allegedly we're going to be able to actually search by course title the names of courses across the state of California. And so I could be able to more readily tell you, gosh, there are these many schools who've gotten their university courses or their UC A to G course list approved that have integrated math as part of that portal. So I think we'll know more, but I have yet to see that be actually debuted.
Yeah.
And the students that you have in Math 1 right now did not go through the program at Matilaha that we approved.
No.
So it'll be very interesting to
It
see
will be.
how that feeds.
And when we have the class of 2020, they'll be the first group who started with the 7th grade piece of it, working with the curriculum that they have there and transitioning into Math 1 as 8th graders. So I think we're going to continue to learn a lot through the process.
If I'm a gauge of anything, I found this book to be a lot easier to understand than the Matilaha books.
No, really?
So,
Well, we know we want to make sure we get to a few slides, so we
Sure.
want to make sure we transition well, but all I'm going to mention about year 2 is we intend to replicate the good things and improve the areas that we need to improve, and you don't need us to read that to you, so not a problem. So I think at this point, we want to go ahead and turn this over to Kendall and Renee. So,
Okay. Hi, Kendall Neely, for anyone who doesn't know, it's my second year at Norwalk teaching math, second year overall also. So up here we have an integrated math 2 problem. Did they get, oh, we're passing out copies right now. It's for victory celebration. So the idea of this problem is students are learning about quadratics and projectile motion. And their goal, this is at the beginning of the unit. So they would get this introduction and they have to extrapolate from the data what's important in these first few paragraphs. And they should, at this point, they have not seen quadratics before. But at the very bottom, if you guys remember your high school quadratic functions, that HT is a quadratic function now. They haven't seen that before. But they're getting their first look at it. And so at the very beginning, they're trying to figure out what are the questions we have to answer to solve this problem. What do we need to know that we don't know yet? The second page would be later on in the book. So after this first introduction, they will have other portions in the book where they're exploring certain things. And that's where we get to play with technology. So I brought my iPad. One of my favorite online tools is called Desmos Graphing Calculator. And it's a really, oh, let's hope it loads here. Yeah, well, no, the Wi-Fi is working. My page just got a little skewed. But anyways, I'll point it this way. So you can add equations in here. Oopsies.
Yeah, why don't you come on up here?
Oh, okay. That works. So I have the equation for a quadratic in here, and what we can do is we can change the values very easily in the equation, and they can see immediately what happens to the shape. So they can see if I change, instead of the height being 50, what happens if the height is now, let's do 10. And they'll see on the graph, if I can get my, oh, it's 510. That's not what I want. I didn't erase. Back up. It doesn't like, there it goes. 510. There we go. So you can see how the y-intercept or the starting point changes to 10, and they can see, okay, so now it's not starting at such a high point. You can change another part of the equation. This is initial velocity for those who remember. It changes the distance, the full overall distance. So if you're throwing something not as heavy, it's not going to go as far or up as long. If you're throwing it really hard, it's going to go really high. It's going to take a lot longer to come down. So they'll see that in the graph. So they're going to be doing investigative work like that and coming up with, okay, what parts of the equation do what? And that's the second part. And as they keep moving through the unit, as they keep moving through the unit, they're working on different parts of what the equation is. So coming down, how long is it going to take for that rocket once you launch it? How many seconds will it be in the air until it hits the ground? And then at the very end of the unit, after they've gone through the problem, their final task is to summarize what they've learned. And that's the final page. Describe in your own words what the context of the problem is. What are the questions that they wanted to answer when they're setting off these fireworks? How did you go about solving them? What did the pieces of the equation mean? So it's at the end of the unit, it's a big summary. So they're taking what they've learned and telling us how they learned it.
So tell me, the first part of the problem is on pages 4 and 5, and the second part is on page 44 and 45.
They learn a lot.
So they're doing a lot of work and then they're coming back to...
Right, so it kind of jumps back and forth. Spirals. So some of, I don't know if you want more detail of what kind of things they would be learning in between. Or
only if I mean, I can kind of see, because I have the book.
Oh, right.
And it's showing those
okay, you
graphs.
can see the different processes.
I'm like, oh, this is math 2?
Yes, yeah. This is, and most,
I missed that part.
I
dog ate that part.
I enjoyed that.
yeah, I too.
It even throws in
But
some
yeah,
geometry.
they do have a lot in between, so they're gaining a lot of understanding and knowledge, and they are learning some of the processes that you were saying in college, the math classes. It is a lot of, understanding equations, and they're going to be learning those and understanding how they work, and they're trying it themselves. So they're going to be getting that, but it's in the context of a bigger picture problem.
You know what's interesting, Kendall, though, if you look at the book, that pages 11 through 16, 17, looks a lot like the old math books. I mean, it actually has equations and parabolas.
Yeah.
So it's not
All
just,
words.
it's not just doing fireworks, right?
Right. There's still math in there.
The words give context.
Yeah.
And then then you learn the tools to go with it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this stuff.
I think Dave made a really good point that trying to find other problems to replicate these, because I remember as a student, I felt really comfortable with one problem, but then when I tried to do the second problem or the third problem, that's where I started to struggle. And so I think that's great if we can figure out a way to do that. I mean, this is fantastic, because I love the idea of solving a problem. But then, yeah, yay, I solved it, now what?
Now what,
Yeah.
We're going to transition this to Renee. She wants to share with you what every parent would love to have their child do. This is a sample problem from Integrated Math 3.
How to get to college. In the world of functions, this is one of the units that I tested out with them. This is a POW problem of the week, which I give them 1 week to complete. They were actually very excited when they saw this, and this is one of the students' works afterwards. And when they came back on the day that it needed to be turned in, they're like, oh my God, we're gonna have to sell the house to pay for college. I mean, it was very eye-opening. The ones that took the time to do the research on the college they wanted to go to, they were shocked. And I said, now you know how your parents feel about this. So this is some of the types of problems that they have, the application to exponential functions, and talking about cost of living and other things.
So at this point, we want to make sure we give some closure and just make sure that you know that we are aware we have concerns and challenges to continue to work on. One of them is that we are going to establish 1 semester of integrated math this summer in summer school, and we're going to be working on problem solving, how best to create that summer school session. So that's something we're just starting the conversations on. We do recognize that we have a need for a 3-year math requirement, and we will be coming to you at some point to be determined to discuss that request. And then obviously there is the expense of curriculum and training, but we feel like it's a merited expense. It's a very important expense, and we appreciate the funding and the support for that. The training has been huge. You know, having Jim Short's support, I can't underestimate the value of the wisdom that we've received. And the rest of it's fairly straightforward in terms of what those challenges are, but we're a good team. We'll figure out what we need to do, but if we have the opportunity for any further questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, Linda?
Question. The kids going to summer school, will you be able to figure out if they have, if their problem with the integrated math is literacy, and is their literacy ability or their math comprehension?
I think that's going to certainly be part of the conversation. So what we're going to be doing is generating a list of students who had either D's or F's in first semester, and then also looking at their third quarter grades, and then having that conversation with the department. I can really see that could be one of the factors. Sometimes it's motivation, though, that's a factor. And one of the great things that we heard from Jim Short, like the wisdom of having someone who's done this before, he said, a student could fail first semester and be successful second semester in integrated math, which is not the way that it is in the traditional math pathway, which was interesting news for us. It made us kind of sit up and say, wow, well, we got to think about that. Because we typically have had students who, let's say they fail first semester of Algebra 1, well, the ship has sailed. If we don't have math during summer school, they have to repeat the whole year the following year. So it's making us sit up and think and look at some options. But I agree. I'm sure that literacy plays a part in it for some students.
And then a second question I have is, if you decide that, well, you've obviously thought clearly that you need a 3rd year, going back to the 3rd year math requirement like we used to have, is it possible to include career technical education as one of the ways of satisfying that requirement?
That's an interesting question. There is actually an existing CTE requirement as an option for either the fine art or foreign language way to satisfy graduation requirements. And then a number of CTE courses actually satisfy the visual and performing arts requirement for applying to a university. I think we'd have to look at, are there specific CTE courses that have a mathematics component, that we would have to actually probably go to something like the UC A to G articulation program workshops. They have certain institutes where courses can be kind of handed over that are somewhat like you described. But I would think that larger high schools would probably be more apt to be able to have the enrollment to drive that. Right now, because when we talk about, at some point, I think some of you have already attended some of the CTE information about the Ventura County Innovates grant and so forth. There may be some opportunity in the future to consider that, but I think we'd have to look at, all right, where's the right kind of place for that to go? And I think maybe you're thinking about engineering potentially.
Yeah, and automotive, automotive mechanics. I mean, I think there's a lot of math involved in that. But I just
Well, the nursing program
and
as
the
well.
nursing program, yeah.
I think we'd have to balance that against other needs with the master schedule, and it would be a conversation point, certainly.
Thank you all very much.
So Nordhoff we don't have algebra and geometry anymore. We now
So
have.
as of next year, we will no longer offer geometry. As of this year, we no longer offer Algebra 1. So that is correct. And then within 2 years, we will no longer have Algebra 2. So we are, as one ramps up, the other phases out. And so for us, it's not a question of whether or not to have the integrated pathway. It's more a question of which curriculum is the best one for us to use. And, obviously we're learning a lot about this one, and more remains to be seen.
Right. And I appreciate that you mentioned that the NPA, the Nordhoff Parents Association,
Very
is helping with the
fortunate.
tutor, because I know we always want to thank the parents who are helping out
It's a
in
huge
the
gift to the
curriculum.
students.
And also just to point out, I'd love to do more of this, what Jim Short was doing for you guys, bring in that sort of assistance as best we could.
NPA's been very supportive. They actually supported Kendall. Kendall took a group of students to the Ventura County Math Competition for the first time in my tenure in my job. So it's kind of an exciting time for us because they've definitely been very supportive of academics. We've been grateful for that. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for having us. We know we took longer than originally planned, but thank you so much.
Oh, it's great. Thank you so much for all your good work. And it's great to get your feedback because this is so important, and talking to the people who are working with the students is just great for us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Moving to 7.3.2, the district of choice.
This is just a state requirement, as you can see from the text. As I've shared with the board, this is very misleading. It looks as if, as one of 3 districts in the county that has district of choice, we have almost no influx of students, which couldn't be farther from the truth. The 2 key paragraphs are numbers 2 and 3, where you can see that prior to December 31st, there has to be a statement presented to us that a family would like to have a child come. And we welcome that, but we had none for last school year and only 7 this year, and then those were rescinded. But all of our influx comes through the inter-district enrollment process, which is post-December 31st. So, and that's very healthy, very positive way of serving students in our neighboring districts, and we send students there also, and we have, very proud to say, we have open borders. So this is just a request that you receive this information, and we can then tell the state that it was on an agenda.
Wonderful. On 7.4.1, the tax and revenue anticipation notes. Essentially, tax and revenue anticipation notes are necessary because we're asked to spend money before the state gives us money. And so we just need to match that cash flow. Do you want to?
Right, and actually Laura and I had a conversation today in response to a question that Jane asked and focused our attention. One of the things that we shared is that back in the 4 or 5 years ago, when we were dealing with the terrible economic times of the nation and the state, our financial advisors recommended that we increase the annual statement to the board requesting $5 million to $7.5 million to cover even worse flows of money from Sacramento. Now it's loosening up, so it's better. We still have this high number, but it really is a maximum. In fact, you can see in the resolution, it's a maximum. And last year, we were barely over $4 million in terms of the amount that we needed to cover. We received it in July, it covered the expenditures through December, and it's an annual statement that exactly as Thane said. You hope, and pretty much on a series of years, you hope that the interest in equals the interest out. Pretty close. Last year, we were a little on the downside because interest rates were so low, right? So we had, and this whole process ended up costing about $25,000. In other years, it could be a bit on the other side. Is that fair? Is that a fair statement, Laura? Would you say that's pretty close? So over a period of years,
For a wash.
over a period of years, it pretty much zeroes out, or at least that's the plan when you and Danny worked on it. So that's what we're asking for again, in this case, in April authorization to get effected in late June and early July.
And this is something we've done every year for quite a lot of years,
Yes.
right?
You know, it's interesting to me, I mean, I just would like to make a statement to the powers that be, you know, about, I mean, $25,000 to our community
Is a lot of money.
very big.
Sure.
I mean, and obviously, bank interest rates are not going to be changing much, you know. You put it in a savings account, we're getting nothing, and now, we don't have a choice.
Right.
And that's a shame.
Do the districts that are basic aid districts, do they have to do this also?
I don't know, I would doubt it, although they retain their property taxes, right? So that the process.
Basic aids would probably.
Basic aid probably not.
Doesn't have to.
I mean, the whole point about being basic aid is that you don't have to worry as much about Sacramento, right?
They're not giving the money.
Right, so
Yeah,
I don't know.
we have a fund balance to substantiate
Right.
the outgoing, you know, we'd be fine.
I would guess not, but I don't know that.
And the reserve obviously doesn't cover,
Oh,
you don't
not
use it.
4 million.
What's the timing in terms of, so this is a bridge, obviously, so when do we typically pay it back? Is it?
Why don't you explain that, Laura?
Early fall?
How does that work?
Yeah, the timing is, we need the cash to cover basically November, December is when we start running short until we get our property tax money, which December property taxes come in really at the end of the month, December. So sometimes we have to cover payroll before we get our property tax money. Runs about $4 million for that, just that December property tax revenue to come in. So then we pay back the trans. Usually, this year we did, I believe, 50% in the end of January and the other 50% in April. We just paid it, yeah.
If you think about, so expenditures in general, I'll just round off, we don't quite have a $24 million budget, but it's easier if you look at it that way. So our expenditures average about $2 million a month, right? So, right, for $4 million, you can cover 2 months of expenditures, and it should about work out, right? If you have to cover December, January, and November, December, as you then pay it back. So it would be great, I mean, going back to what Jane said, it'd be great if we had a property tax calendar so that we received all the property taxes by October, right? And then we wouldn't have to borrow any money to cover the end of the last 2 months of the calendar year. And not, just to let you know, this is not just a California thing. I mean, every Cook County in Illinois was just, notorious for holding money. And people are always scrambling around with their reserves and borrowing to cover stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident that as the general funding increases, that we can roll back this number, right? We should be able to roll it back some, not all, but some.
Any other questions? Comments? Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll motion to approve the 7.5 million.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. So we'll move to 7.5.1, board protocols. We started this conversation at our work session retreat in January. We've had a chance to go over it a little bit, but there are just so many words And
It's a lot of words.
there are a lot of words, and you know, I met with Jane, and we talked through a bunch of the stuff. I went back and tried to incorporate some of the different versions that we'd been given, plus some of the existing wording we had, and I came up with this, but it's not cast in stone yet. And now's the time for us to discuss if there are comments that anyone has and how we want to move forward. So, any comments?
I'll start. I'm looking at number 15, and Thane and I talked about this, and we're hoping for some input on wording that would make more sense to address the issue. Actually, 15A, that direct the following to the superintendent, requests for information. And I think Hank, and you and I had maybe at some point talked about that sort of sense of different people in a community are more comfortable with other different people. So let's say I'm more comfortable sharing something with Kathy than I am with Thane or something. So we want to recognize that fact that somebody might be more comfortable sharing with Hank than with me, or more comfortable sharing with me than with Hank. So if everything is has to go, if Hank has to ask for everything, it might change the way someone is comfortable answering it. But the important thing is that Hank is aware of the need for it. Like sort of, you know, so if I have a question for Marilyn, I can ask Marilyn, but I copy Hank on it.
Oh, that, okay.
Isn't that what we?
Yeah, we did talk about that, sure.
So that she knows that, I don't know. It's
Okay.
a very weird.
No, when you got to the end of the statement, I understood what you meant.
Yeah.
So my reaction to that is the following. And I think I felt this way in various parts of my career. So I'll just say how I feel now. I don't have a need, let's just try to stay with the board for a minute. I don't want to have you feel that every time you have a question about the school district that you need to ask me, okay? But I think the way you described it is terrific. You know, and so I can just tell you that some principals, I'll just say principals, are more comfortable than others answering a question from a board member. If I know that you have a question and you send me, and it's much easier to do it by email than phone, obviously, but if you have a question that pertains to a particular part of the operations of the district with Andy or with Josh or with Suzanne or someone, and it's very focused on that particular area of the district, as long as you just send me a copy of what you send to that person, I can either not get involved at all, or I can say to you and the other person, here's a thought that you might incorporate into the answer that you give to Jane. Okay? So I could do one or the other, or maybe actually I might answer the question. So I guess what I'm now understanding is that I think if you're sort of reaching for latitude to talk with, let's say with it, not teachers now, I'm talking about teachers, administrators, that latitude to convey a question to that person with a copy to me, I think is absolutely fine. So I don't think, if what you felt from this language is every question that a board member has, regardless of what it is, needs to come to me and only me, no, I don't think.
That's the way I was reading. That's what I was like, well, it just sounds.
There might be an easy fix to this in terms, because what you said takes a whole page here.
Well, I know. But I didn't know exactly what your concern was until you got to the end.
Actually, Jane, I didn't either. So, but I think an easy fix might be to say, direct the following to the superintendent or designee.
And or designate.
And or designate.
And designate. Okay, so in other words, I don't want to get to a situation of either extreme. I don't want to get to a situation where board member X, Y, Z, etc. is going directly to people who operate parts of the district, and I'm completely unaware of it. Because that's just not how I operate. I don't think it's the way the district ought to be run. I also don't want you to feel that, like I just said before, everything only may come to me. So if you can figure out a way to say to board members, I want you to have the freedom to ask the leader of any school or part of the district a question, and as long as I just know that you're asking the question, then it's up to me to decide how best to proceed. That's all, okay? And as you know, I will not hesitate to either get involved, or I'll tell you I'm not going to get involved. So if you can figure out wording that says that, okay, that's just sort of got and/or, it's not or designate, because then I'm not involved.
Well, you're designating the person.
Yeah, but I'd have to know about it. I'd have to know about it. So I would guess I would say, I think I would say and designate, or designate.
We don't want it to apply to B, C, D, and E, we just want it to apply to A.
A, right, and and maybe I can fiddle with it a little bit too, to figure it out. But that's how I feel, okay? That's what I think.
I mean, I'm just thinking it could apply to any of those if Hank wants to designate somebody to do that. Like, if it's a HR issue, a criticism, personnel complaints, maybe that goes to Andy.
Personally, I think that level of detail is just too in the weeds for my desires.
Okay.
This is my first opportunity to speak under the Brown Act on it. It feels to me like that's just too detailed. It feels like we should be dealing at a higher level with protocols, because it's just so specific.
It is specific.
Yeah.
15 is very specific.
Yeah, and I feel like it's too much so.
Okay.
I guess I would have to concur just a little bit. I go back to something I said earlier. I'm not a fan of trustees reaching down deep into an organization.
Right.
I think it creates awkwardness for the staff, and I think the impression that an individual trustee board member is sort of going off on a private investigation. I mean, not that anybody necessarily is talking about doing that, but there's always the danger of that perception. And I think it's incumbent that you be included in those.
I'm not backing up that at all.
Requests.
Right.
I don't think we should ever go directly to staff at all. I appreciate the distinction between staff and leadership. But even there, I want you involved.
Yeah, well.
Because I want to know, you report to us, right?
Exactly.
So I want to know what you think about what the staff who reports to you is saying.
That's great comment. So think about timing for a minute. There are two ways to do this. So a board member says, I would love to have a conversation with the director of X. Let's say Jackie Law in special ed. And we could run it one of two ways. If you said that to me, if we set this up, whatever language we pick or don't pick. If I said, I guarantee you that if you say that to me, I will ensure that you will be able to talk to her, okay? And I will be the person who will create the entry for that and help that conversation unfold. In that case, you came to me with a guarantee that you can talk to that person. So that's one way to do it. The other way, so now we're talking about timing, right? So you come to me, I make sure it happens. The other way is sort of the word we were talking about, and that is you want to talk to the other person, let's say with Jackie, copy to me. If for some reason, I can't imagine exactly what it would be, but if for some reason I felt it was inappropriate, then I have to step in and intervene, you see, and say, no, don't do that. And that's awkward, because it almost looks like I'm saying to a board member, no, you can't do that, don't do that, which I would do if I felt it was inappropriate. So I think now that we're sort of dealing with the broader issue, either way in my mind works. The one that doesn't work is where the board member goes directly to the person in charge, and then I find out later from that person, right? So A or B works, C doesn't work.
Right.
So,
Michael, I see that, in terms of, if it's business, you're the CEO, and I guess what I'm thinking is more often people would come to a board member and raise a complaint. And it'd be important that Hank be appraised of that.
Agree with that.
Boy, that sidewalk has been tripping students for.
Yeah. Especially if you're going to schools and having lunch with teachers and stuff like that. Those things will come up. Those will come up,
It
yeah.
happens, right.
Which I think is different, though. I think,
Right.
people
That's what I'm
bringing
saying. You
information
made
to us
me
is completely
Yeah.
different. And I don't want any restrictions on that. I don't want anybody between me and constituencies, right? But us going out to somebody
You
else.
initiate it.
Yeah,
You initiate
so that has a different cast to it. So, yeah, I agree with you.
It does, it does. I mean, I guess my confidence level in in everybody here, the faculty certainly, but that's not really what we're talking about. My confidence level in the leadership and as a group and individually is so high that I'm willing to say what I said, that I think that as long as concurrently, that interest on the part of the board member comes to me and the person, I can go with that. If I think it's being, I won't even say abused, overused, then I would say something, okay? So, probably the more standard approach is exactly what Mike's talking about, that it would, requests will come to me, information, it obviously is in the bailiwick of somebody else, I'll be sure you get that answer, either from me or from that person. So that's more standard, okay? But, we're not a huge organization here. I mean, if I thought that was being not used correctly, I think I would say that. I know I would say that. I have belief in that I would. So, if you want to think about this a little more, struggle a little bit, I think either one works. Either one works.
I'm fine. Kevin, are you thinking of striking that, the whole number 15 and something like number 13 that is specific? Is that what you're saying, or no?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I put 13 in the same category. I mean, it just feels to me like the job's bigger than that. And with respect, I mean, I guess I just feel like we have to be trusted to exercise good judgment first and foremost. And you exercise good judgment applying certain principles. And the principles of our service should be what we talk about here, not, I guess the lawyer in me says, let's talk about the principles and not the statute. It feels like a statute to me, like you shall bring the following things. I don't know. There might be a time when I feel like in my best judgment I'm not going to do that. And I don't want to feel like I'm in violation of protocols because for whatever reason in my good judgment, I want to do something different.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can go either way on it. I mean, I think I went the first couple of years and I didn't know we had protocols. So I'm okay with that. But I think I mean, from my perspective, I think we have a mission, we have a vision. Those are the broader things. The word protocol kind of brings to my mind how we do things. I think to me, it feels like a more specific word, but I'm not dogmatic about that at all.
Nor am I. I mean, if you all were in favor of it, I will join you.
We've got a couple of things kind of glommed in here together, right? I mean, there's sort of like job duties, we will study this and all these things, and then there's also the commitments that we make to each other and how we will treat each other, and they're all kind of intermixed, which I think is what's making this really long, because
that's true.
There's the statements of principle, right, that we will operate with honesty, integrity, we will listen to what people have to say to us, we will follow the rules, and then there's the really prescriptive things like how to get something on an agenda, what study sessions are for. I don't know that those are protocols in the sense that we've been discussing them. Because my impression of protocols was more, how are we going to operate and what principles are we going to operate by? What are we dedicated to? The rest of this stuff is more like orientation for a trustee. Right? I mean, a board member, how do you, like...
I think we use the word trustee here, too.
Okay, thank you.
You're good with the trustee.
Get that out of my head.
Yeah.
We'll forgive you.
In fact, well, right here, you can call us a board member or a trustee.
Yeah, right.
Well, actually had looked at a lot of protocols, went through several California schools and looked at the protocols. And there were several that had general, specific.
Yeah.
So they did break it. The general is integrity, and a specific is, I think it gives people in the community, and even us, a chance to say, hey, the community has spoken to me and said, we really wish the board members would come to school sites. And we have, 4 members who are doing that, and one who's, I'm just making this up, this is not what someone has said to me. We have 1 person who's not doing that. Well, then we can go and say, look, we agreed that part of our, it wasn't just to come once a month, it was to be involved enough to visit school sites. And if we don't have that anywhere, there's nothing to there's no reason why a board member would, or should, would have to do that. So, I guess the community could just say, well, then we're not going to re-elect that board member because they're not taking the time and energy to visit school sites. But I think it's important to show what's important to us by being a little bit more specific. Because sometimes I read these sort of visions and mission statements and go, well, of course, we want students to learn. We want, so those are kind of like, why?
Yeah, and I think some of these, it's good for the public to know how it happens. I just think we have to be careful not to mix, the mechanics of how we do our business with the protocols of, what our principles are and how we agree to treat each other and the job, which I think are 2 different things. And it kind of, when they're all blended together like this, it just blurs the message.
Maybe they should be separated by
I like the
protocols and
general and
guidelines.
specific.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
general and
like what you're
specific,
saying.
yeah, that's good.
Well, we could spend 3 or 4 years
or more
in getting this worked out. I'm really open to any ideas. It sounds like there's a feeling on both sides that we should have some specifics and that we should have some general things. It makes perfect sense to break those out into general and specific if we want to do that. Which items, well, maybe I can make a suggestion on 15. If we say "and designee," does that?
I'm fine with this as is. It doesn't matter.
Which item, maybe we should just go through and say this is general, this is specific, or we want to get rid of it?
Yes, I agree.
So, 1.
General.
Little wordsmithing there, we're dignified and dignity isn't the same.
It's true, there's a lot of dignity.
Civility,
Maybe-
get rid of dignity.
Maybe pull out the second dignity.
Okay.
You're just treating everyone with civility.
Got that? All right. So we need to be dignified. No, that's great. I'm happy to do this. So number 2.
General.
Yeah, general.
3,
General,
4,
general.
5.
General.
I think that's specific. That's a very specific and important, an important specific.
For those at home, recognize the rights of individual board members to freely express their views and encourage open discussion of issues on the agenda and honoring the right to disagree with each other while not engaging in inappropriate debate.
I think it's general. Thank you.
We could have 3 sections.
No.
This is general,
No.
this is a little less general, and this is specific.
I'm not sure what number 6 means.
Yeah, right.
Well, I think it's, for example, if we normally have the public come and speak for 3 minutes each, and then all of a sudden, there's a topic that we don't want to talk about, and we say, okay, the public can only talk for 1 minute each for 5 minutes, that would be inappropriate.
But
So I think it's consistently applying the rules that we have.
I would think that that scenario is the unlikely one. I think the more likely is that there's a real hot button issue. People are standing outside with pitchforks and, you know, flaming torches.
Boy, you go to the
and we decide to hear them longer than we might otherwise. Is that okay? And I would say, yes, it's okay. I wouldn't want to be limited. I'd want to be able to say, there are times when we put the rules aside and say,
Well, we almost always put the rules aside. I mean, in
as we
practice.
should.
So we're doing that consistently.
Right.
So maybe it just needs to say, allow public participation at meetings.
Maybe it doesn't need to say anything.
Maybe
because
we
we've
get rid of
already
that
said
one.
We're treating people dignified.
Yeah, why don't we
civil
just get
manner,
rid of that?
And that we're going to listen to diverse viewpoints.
Yeah, we're required to do that anyway by
Yeah,
law.
let's get rid of it.
Isn't it all in that?
That's easy. 7,
It's important.
but is that general or specific?
But what are we saying? What is this saying? Because we're already saying we're going to listen to input, we're going to listen to community priorities. I mean, what is this statement adding?
Well, this is adding financial impacts.
Okay.
So, in
And
decision
best
making.
practices.
Yeah. That's general.
Yeah.
General? 8?
General.
and by the way, on 8, could I suggest that instead of seeking to avoid surprises by requesting agenda items and information in advance, we're really trying to maximize productivity, aren't we?
Right.
I think the surprises is not really the issue.
It makes the board more effective.
Right, we want to be productive. We don't want to waste our time teaching somebody about something they could have learned earlier.
Okay, so instead of avoid surprise,
To maximize productivity at public meetings, we will request agenda items and information in advance.
okay, so is that general or specific?
General.
That's still
General, yeah.
Okay. And 9?
Sort of
Yeah,
saying the same
specific.
thing, isn't it, huh?
Well, if we take out the first sentence, then we already did that.
It's specific. It's pretty prescriptive after the first sentence.
Right. Very. It's
Okay.
pretty specific.
So we get rid of the first sentence,
I don't need that. Right?
and then, do we need this at all?
Well, this is the thing that I think it's interesting for the public to see.
Okay, so this,
How we do
we
it,
put this in the
yeah.
specific
Yeah.
area. Okay.
I agree.
I think we need to, so this is specific. I think we need to do a little word crafting here because all of the rest is the board will, whatever. So I'll try to put something that follows, but not change the idea there. So 10,
Specific, I think.
Specific, yeah.
11,
General.
okay, 12,
Specific.
13,
Specific.
14,
General. I think that's general.
okay, 15,
That's
Very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
16,
I think that's general. I mean, I think that's sort of the way boards operate.
Then you should take out the last sentence, because that's specific. The board president or designate will be the board spokesperson.
Let me just ask a question on the focus of the statement. Is the focus of this statement to emphasize that the board acts as a board or to prohibit us acting individually? It is written in a way to...
My understanding was that it's to prohibit us from acting individually under color of being the board.
Right.
I mean, there should be absolutely no prohibition about us reaching out to the community and doing whatever we do. I think what the issue would be to say, I speak for the board and therefore whatever. Or somebody comes to us and says, you know, I want this for my kid, and we say, I'll take care of that for you.
Mike, I think to me what it does is it defines the official authority of the board.
I would start there then rather than saying what we don't have the authority to do. You know what I mean? When we're wordsmithing, I prefer to talk in a more positive cast.
The official authority of the board lies with the board as an entity.
As a whole, right.
As an entity.
Right. Because that's the real message. The board acts
as opposed
as
to
a whole.
do not. Yeah, that sounds like, again, it's coming from a negative view.
Other than the second part about who the board's spokesperson, it seems like it's just a statement of the obvious.
It's
right?
general. It's general.
Did you get Thane the?
Recognize that the board acts as a whole.
The authority of the board is as an entity. An entity. Okay, it's a
Lies in the entity, not in the individual.
exactly. That's a good way. I like that. That's good. That's well said.
If I can write it fast enough. That the authority of the board.
Well, as with the entity, not as any individual board member. And that'll get to the...
I would never run for the office of that. So I can't just do stuff.
You can do stuff, it doesn't mean anything.
That's like being at home.
Authority of the board lies with the entity and not the individual.
Yeah, not the individual member, not the individual member. Right.
And then continue on with the rest, or?
Nah.
I don't think so. Probably don't need a special.
Just have that be number 16.
Yeah.
That's good.
No, that's the year specific.
Can I suggest we invert 19 and 18? So you've got the expectations ahead of the evaluation?
Yes.
Sure. Okay.
Well, if you have to.
Wait a second.
You have to make that big a change.
So 16 now becomes general, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And 17 is general? Specific. See, that's why I'm asking you, because I...
think all
And
three
18 and 19 are specific.
Yeah.
Okay, specific, and we're
17, 19.
switching 18 and 19.
Good.
All right.
Got through the
I'm
list.
not
Very
clear
good.
on number 5. Is it general or specific? I heard both.
Yeah, we need,
5 was general.
I have it marked as general.
any strong opposition to general? Okay, let's go with that. Fantastic.
Okay, nice job on that.
So we'll come back with a final?
Yeah,
and then
We'll be back in
May
2
weeks.
weeks.
And May
So,
5th. May 5th.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that's better. Make sure we didn't make any mistakes. That's great. Okay, going back to 7.5.2, information about the bond sale.
Well, it's done. The money is in the bank. Very positive. I reported to you, the trip to San Francisco was worth doing. I think we achieved maybe one higher level of rating than we would have if we hadn't gone. I'd like to think that. And ultimately, we hit the market at a great time. I'm not going to go through all the details because you've been reading about it, but basically we came in that mid 3.7% range, which was, as John Isom said in his covering statement here, a very favorable figure. So, you've already read what you need to read. You know that the money was in the bank as of last Thursday. And then in his memorandum from March, it's just the whole detail of the various bond ratings, and we ended up at A. So that's a good thing, or A1. And I'm just pleased with the process. So now we move forward. Now the money's in the bank. We have some things to do, and we'll get to those actually in the next, one of them we'll get to in the next agenda item. And then after that, we'll get to the following agenda item, talk about that too. So that's it. It's a report on the bond sale.
Terrific. Thank you. Thanks for those efforts.
You bet. It was a pleasure.
Well done.
Thank you.
7.5.3, scheduling of 2 special board meetings. The first is the Citizens Oversight Committee.
Right. Well, this, as you can see, this is at least, well, it's 14 citizens of Ojai, and then some other people. Myself I'd be 15, and then others. Not too many others, but maybe 3 or 4 other administrator types. So Kathy will have quite the, the matrix, right, to figure that one out. Okay. So tonight I'm asking you to give her the charge to get that meeting called, and we know what it's about, right? Because when the COC was appointed, and Kevin and Jane spoke to it eloquently that night, we had a lot of conversation among the candidates. Remember, we had 16 candidates, chose 9, about sort of what would be the scope of authority and responsibilities of the COC relative to the board, relative to me and the administrative staff. And we agreed that it was worth the however many of us, it's called 20 or so, 20 people coming together in this room in a public meeting to have the conversation, right? And so one of the other things, remember, we talked about, Kevin and Jane, we said that we're not just going to, like, everybody show up and start talking. Right? We decided that we'd have some options, right? We had some thoughts about what might be the most appropriate scope of responsibilities or not. Right? So that, I think, if you wouldn't mind working with me on that, okay? We can get back together, 3 of us. So well in advance of the meeting, a week or so, if we could put out those options to the 5 of you, obviously, and then to the 9 members of the COC administrative staff, and we'll just, whatever process we decide. One thing I do a lot of times is, if there are choices to be discussed at a meeting, and I get those choices out in advance, in the normal operations of the district, I'll ask people to get back to me with, like, this is my top choice, okay, or whatever. So we can decide to do that. There's nothing negative about the Brown Act on that one, okay? It's just information like the superintendent, so that I could collate that and we could start talking about that, right? Rather than have 20 people, or forget the administrators, 14 of you to start talking, right? So I'd rather have it focused. And I think that's what we agreed on. So otherwise it'd be a very long meeting. So that's sort of what I was thinking, as a follow-up to the March 11th. So if you'd be...
So from our perspective, we're being asked to authorize Hank and Kevin and Jane.
We work with Kathy to get us together.
To organize the going forward meeting of the COC.
Right. I would say, as soon as possible. I mean, hopefully, it doesn't need to be before or after the May board meeting, but whenever it happens. But, I'd say no later than mid-May. I mean, it ought to be within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
And it's a public meeting, so.
Exactly. So, we'll see. Anyway, that's number 1.
So why don't we do that? Do we have a motion?
I'll move.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Great. And then the second part is meeting with the city council.
Yeah, this is a little different now. So I informed the board that Rob Clark had talked to me I think it was the day before our spring break, that he was anticipating an April 14th agenda item that would follow interest expressed by a couple of, it turned out to be a couple of city council members to designate Chaparral as an historic landmark. To which I responded, okay, maybe that would be a good thing to talk about rather than just sort of have it happen. And he agreed. So the concept was he would go back and talk with the council, however he did that, and or talk about it on April 14th in the context of what I just wrote about here. And that would be that if you agree, the city council agreed that night, they would like to meet with you, not just on that subject, right? So if you remember the article in the Ojai Valley News, Mayor Lara said that we have several issues to talk about. I agree with that. I think, Thane, you agree with that, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so...
Oh, yeah, we got some stuff to talk about.
That's right. So, anyway...
Maybe we should take this outside.
They can do that in the city council.
All right. Time out. All right, so, anyway, the theory is...
We have a sense of humor here at the school board.
The theory is that 10 of you council board member types, Rob and I and some others, would have a public meeting again, and we would talk about whatever that agenda turned out to be. And my recommendation is that the 4 of us, Thane and I and Rob and Savaro, meet to create the agenda which then we can publish in the newspaper, so people will know what we're taking outside. Okay, but anyway, one of the issues for sure is this idea of the landmark designation. And I'll just leave it at that right now, because there's a lot more that needs to be learned about that process. So anyway, that's my recommendation, that we respond to have the meeting. What's the matter?
I believe Mr. Ulrich wanted to speak on this.
Okay, well, we decided we're going to have to talk about the issue first. and-
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the issue, that's the issue. My recommendation is that we be responsive to the city council who asked to meet with you.
Right. So what we're being asked to approve is whether Hank and I should organize a meeting so that we can schedule a meeting with all of us to discuss all of the issues that have any relevance between the school and the city, or maybe not all of them, but some of them, and set up an agenda for that.
And I'd like to say, I believe that we very consistently said during our retreat that we felt like that was an obvious thing that we should be doing. So on multiple subjects, and obviously the potential designation of Chaparral as a historical building, needless to say, has some impact on development opportunities, but broadly speaking, we of course want to have communications with the city about any potential development and all that stuff. So I think it's probably been a long time coming.
Yeah, this may be the springboard, not to have just one meeting, but regular interaction. Great. So,
I'll move.
Okay.
Do we need to hear from William first before we?
Any additional comments?
Couple. Actually, one of them has to do with the Citizens Oversight Committee. How many meetings do you anticipate?
Can I want to be really respectful on this, but I feel like we're kind of, again, breaking our rules to have you come back and speak on more issues. You spoke earlier, and you could have spoken about anything you wanted to. But more importantly, this isn't a question and answer session. This is a time for public comment, so we're more than happy for you to comment, but we don't want to get into a question and answer session.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair Whipple. However, I signed up for 3 other matters when I put in my speaker card. They're referenced there. So one of them was 7.4.1, and I don't know if I missed it, you skipped over it, whatever. But
Well, no, you were welcome to speak about any issues you wanted to when you were up here before.
My understanding is as they came up, since it does ask for agenda items versus planning.
My apologies. I'll try to make that more clear at the beginning of our meeting.
Yeah, okay, so at this point, if I understand what you're saying is you don't want to entertain questions. I will consider my comments then to be in the form of questions. Okay, there hasn't been, to the best of my knowledge, besides one publication that indicated there would be one citizens oversight, anticipated one citizens oversight committee meeting per year. Now, perhaps I misread that. Perhaps I misunderstand that. Perhaps you were discussing earlier an initiation meeting. But once again, that is my perception as a member of the public, and if it needs to be disabused, I'd appreciate that. Moving to your reference to the city council, and your vote on that one. If I understand that also correctly from comments made earlier, that initiative was promoted or initiated by the Ojai City Council, or excuse me, through the Ojai City Manager. If I misunderstood that, then I would appreciate being disabused of that. I appreciate that you guys are having that meeting or looking at that initiation of that meeting at all. I had a meeting last week with the mayor, and he indicated he was looking forward to making that not only a watermark matter as between these two bodies, because I don't think it's been done before, or at least on a regular basis, but more importantly, he was looking at doing it from the perspective of it being a regular thing. And I would just like to say I'm in support of that. So, but the only other comment I would make, of course, is it took you so long. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any comments or questions from the board?
Actually, I would just briefly to let you know, William, that the one meeting a year for the Citizens Oversight Committee is what's required by law, but we have discussed with the members that that's going to be part of the scope that we discuss at the meeting we set up, how often they would like to meet and feel they need to meet.
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else, we'll move to
You haven't approved the
Approved the two
meeting.
meetings.
the second meeting.
Yeah.
Great. Can we have a motion to approve that?
No move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. 7.5.4, Hank, you want to tell us about the...
There's a copy available for anybody in the public who came of the Delenka Group report. I had not an embarrassment of riches, but we had, I'd say, 3 solid firms with whom I had good conversations about these 2 services that we need to get to what Mr. Ulrich was asking about in the early part of the meeting. The precedent, the prelude to a full master plan is knowing what your student enrollment is going to be and what your present classroom utilization is, and potentially some changes in that classroom utilization, which then becomes the master plan when it is incorporated with a very large set of data that we have already from Balfour Beatty on the specific needs of our facilities. So, and one of the things I think is really important as you're thinking about this work is that when you're making important public decisions about the use of space, whether you have 20 elementary schools and you're thinking about going to 22 or 18, or you have 5 elementary schools and you're thinking about some other number, or you're thinking about not a 7-8 middle junior high, but a 6-8 middle school, whatever it might be, it's important to have professional data. And the professional data comes from companies like this. Now, one of the things that's different about this proposal, and it's something I negotiated very directly, is if you look on page 19, okay? Number one, they were good about changing their norm, which is half up front, half at the end. I thought that was a little much. So we went to a quarter up front, which I have no problem with. But, so that's sort of one issue. The second issue is that, I'm looking at a timing where, assuming they get their work done when they say they will, because I'm going to call them tomorrow to approve this, they believe they can give us a capacity study by our June, at or before, a little bit, our June 30th board meeting. So we can leave in the summer, we can put people on the work of making sure we know all the implications of what that study says to us. And we can construct a 7-Eleven committee, which you agreed you wanted to have at the last meeting. Right? If you look at that chart, right, okay, from the minutes. That 7-Eleven committee, you would never construct it to work in the summer because that just doesn't work. But what you would want to do, I think, is to have a 7-Eleven committee that would meet right out of the blocks in the fall with the data that we would have on classroom utilization, present classroom utilization, and options for the future. And we also would have our demographic study done by the August board meeting. So you'll have both parts of this company's work in the hands of the 7-Eleven committee when they come together first thing in the fall. That would be my vision for the calendar. And the reason I recommended that this firm do the work, although the other firm was fine, is that, as I shared with you in the notes, this firm has done a lot more work in our local communities, that is Ventura County. They have outstanding references in general, but in particular, the person about whom I received the best recommendations, return to my team, as experience, get to the team, here we go, page 10. Mr. McFadden, he's the executive director of the company, and I won't read everything, but he has excellent experience as an assistant superintendent, CBO, and one of the school districts in our area, the CBO of that district spoke glowingly about Mr. McFadden, and he is the point person on our project. Okay? So if you approve this, I will be calling Mr. McFadden tomorrow and tell him I want to see him as soon as possible, and we'll start walking around the schools, and I would more than welcome you to join me. Okay, I'll give you the calendar.
Schedule, okay.
Yeah,
That'd be
okay.
good.
So it'd be Hank, Mr. McFadden, Brett, the principal, any teachers who are interested in taking a walk with us, and any one of you, okay, who'd like to go.
Oh, Josh?
Josh, absolutely Josh, thank you very much. Josh, Hank, principal, Brent, and any one of you who would like to join us, and I'd be happy to open it up to the public, if they want to, because, we're going to be, going to all the classrooms and seeing how they're used right now, and how many classrooms are regular classrooms, and art, music, etc. And then eventually it'll come back to us in a form of a report. First step in the process.
We'll be walking through the classrooms in session?
We can do that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Well, I'm
you
just
sort of,
wondering.
you sort of peek in, I mean, I want him to see how the rooms are used. Once you know it's a regular classroom, you don't need to have 6 adults walking through.
Parading through, yeah.
No, you
That
don't
would be
need
a little
You don't need that.
distracting.
You don't need, no, you do not need that.
Are there any questions, comments?
I have one. Hey, do you know, are there any statutory, requirements? If, God help us, we are in a position where we feel we need to close a school. Are there any sort of required findings? And if there are these guys mindful of those and going to be providing information in the appropriate context?
They do this for a living. Remember, the people you use, if you process a closing, the absolute one thing you have to do is a 7-Eleven committee. That's
Right.
number one. Second thing I would do, for sure, is to not only rely on their expertise and enrollment and classroom utilization, but you go to your attorney and be sure that you have all T's crossed and I's dotted. And there are things that you need to do. I won't try to expound on all those right now, because I would want to be sure that I have it exactly right. But ultimately, it is a judgment call. And that's what the board is elected to do, and what I'm appointed by you to do is to give you the best information that I can to help you make that decision. It is a judgment call. I mean, we could have 5 elementary schools for however long or less. I'm not going to have more than 5. And ultimately, you'll see the data. I've talked about this before. You'll see the data, you'll see the utilization, you'll see the costs, you'll see options for how we could house what ultimately will be some fewer students than we have now. And there will probably be more than one option. And I mean, I've been through this in various ways. One of the things that conceivably can be out there when you're looking at options other than your present situation is having different geographies than you have now, right? As in boundary lines. Okay. On the other hand, it's not that relevant here because we have kids moving all over the place.
I was going to say.
I mean, but a board could say, until 2016, we basically had open boundaries if we had space. But starting in 2017, we're changing that, right? So now here are the boundaries. They could even be the same boundaries you have now. Here are the boundaries, but we're not going to have as much movement because we want to create a different use of space. I mean, there's so many options. So the answer predominantly is 7-Eleven committee, then some legal requirements, but mostly it comes down to a judgment call of the board.
Did you tell me, I think in a conversation you told me that there's some software that companies like this use that show you.
They have
color coded.
They all have it. They all have it. They have, it's pretty fancy, okay? And I have to say, in a bigger district, it's probably more critical. Here, it's important, but that's why I said to them, I think your price is fair. I have no problem with the price, but the original organization of the 10,500 was leaning more toward enrollment projections and less towards the classroom utilization. And I said, I don't think you're going to have to spend that much time on the enrollment projections. Because we have good ones. Danny was pretty much spot on, but she didn't take it, out past where we want to go. We want to go to 2017 to 25.
Right.
Okay. And now, once, the kids aren't born yet, it's hard to do that. So you have to use your best judgment, okay? But that's what they do, that's their business. So the main thing I want to share with you tonight is I think they're a first-rate company, they have great references. Fred McFadden comes with specifically wonderful references himself. And this is the first step in creating a decision on your part about how to use our facilities.
Any other questions?
I would agree that this is a very good price. I was quite surprised to see this.
I was too.
I did wonder why all three had the exact same price, though. I'm thinking.
No, they didn't know, two did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the one I actually didn't recommend was the lowest.
Okay.
And we don't have to choose the lowest, I had some concerns. But the other one that I thought was solid was the same price. Yeah.
Great. We're being asked to appoint the Lincoln Group LLC to complete a demographic projections and space utilization study for the district. Do you have a motion to approve?
I move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Moving to 7.5.5, we had this on last month's agenda. There were some concerns about the wording. As it turns out, in January, there will be completely new rules about developer fee applications for districts. It doesn't mean we have to wait for January, but I think it's been recommended that we don't take any action right now.
That's what I'm recommending.
And so, if anybody has any comments or questions, that's fine, but otherwise we'll just move on and come back to it when we have a better handle on it.
And you're right, that's it. And but I'd like to, I know you would do it anyway, just take a formal action to defer.
Right.
Okay.
I'll move to approve the recommendation that we defer any actions on that resolution.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. On to the superintendent's report, 7.5.
Okay, I've been pretty much not giving you much of a report the last couple of months because we've been going pretty late.
Yeah, it's so light out, Hank.
Yeah, so I'll try not to talk until it isn't. I can do this. I can do this in a couple of minutes. I would say that what's important to think about. I guess I'll call this a report. What's important to think about is the confluence of several things that are happening as of like today through the May board meeting on through the June 2nd first meeting in June, which is budget. And the confluence is figuring out the revenues that we're going to have. Laura and I and a representative from the OFT will go, is Santa Barbara office, is that where it is? Yeah. So Santa Barbara Office of Education, which that's where Andy's been, to hear the financial experts mid-May. So we're waiting for the May revise. And so we need revenues. We know what those are. We need to take a look at our expenditures that we know we're going to have, and Laura's working on that every day. Then we bring, bless you, bring to you, and the OFT will bring to its membership, and the CSEA will bring to its membership, the choices that are critical for 2015-16. And those are what I've shared with you before. Hopefully, we're going to have some options to take a look at removing the last furlough days from the district. I think we'll have that choice. I think we will have a choice to take a look at salary schedules, albeit not a big, dynamic change, but I think there's an option to take a look at that. We might even have an option to take a look at some more staff. Now, I'm not going to say there's going to be a dramatic change in class sizes next year. That's not going to happen. But those three expenditure options are just, frankly, exciting even just to say.
Yeah.
Okay? Because I haven't been able to say much of that in the last 5 years. So it's exciting to say it. I don't want to oversell it because I don't know how many dollars we're talking about. But in my mind, I have a number, and I hope we get there. We also know that as of the last board meeting, March board meeting, we know that we had a couple $100,000 of available funds. However, that did not remove all the furlough days, and it did not take into consideration any salary increase, right? So we are hoping and expecting that we will be enhancing that amount of money, which isn't great, it's less than 1% of the budget, but enhancing that with the revenue increase, and then we can all together, whether you want to call it negotiations if you want. I'm talking about sitting down with my colleagues and the leadership of OFT and CSEA and you, and processing improvements. That's what I'm talking about, okay? So that to me is like the best report I could give you. It just is, because it's a turnaround from downturn to plateau to slight uptick, right? And it's great news, but again, I don't want to be overly optimistic until we see that number. Right, Laura?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is great to hear. To manage expectations of those options.
Yes.
It's not, all of the above may not be an option.
I don't think all the above, it depends on how you vision each part, but I think probably all the above is not a likely option. But some change in two of those, yeah, maybe a little three. I mean, I think we can maybe do a little bit of all of them, but just, don't get too excited about how big the change is.
And like you say, to be talking about this instead of the opposite.
That's the best part. You bet.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
Great.
That was 5 minutes.
Items for future agendas.
I just have one thing I want to say. It's not really an item.
Sure.
Can I say it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We break the rules here all the time.
I want to thank Laura Meisch for being such a hardworking person and being here, working all the time, coming to board meetings, and I know you're going to have a lot to do with our new assistant superintendent, but thank you so much for all your hard work and everything that you've done for the district.
That was
You
nice.
deserve
I
a
like that.
standing ovation.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a nice thing to say. Good rule break.
And boy, aren't we glad we let you say it.
Yes.
Thanks, Linda. That's true. And thanks, Laura. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Is there anything else? I do have one item. We got kind of in trouble last year because as a board, we kind of let slide our annual evaluation of the superintendent and a look at the contract. So I would like us to, I think that's a closed session item, but I think we ought to schedule that for the summer when it's supposed to happen, rather than let it slide.
You mean the summer of 2015?
Yes.
Summer of 2015.
You got to do it before.
Oh, that summer.
Before the
Before June 30th.
before the impeachment and the new election. We have to get it done.
Exactly. All right.
Thank you.
So
I appreciate that.
So let's do that. And most of my saying that was because of the good report. If it had not been a good report.
Well, of course, I have everything to do with the more money we're getting, right?
So just like a president, you take credit for good things.
And blame everybody else when it goes badly.
That's right. Consent calendar.
Actually, just have,
Yeah.
on the 8.4.7, disposal of the surplus property,
No.
I'm
Okay.
just hoping that every school has got a copy of that, because I know, just because, Nordhoff doesn't want something, or Chaparral doesn't
Oh,
want
I see.
something, not that it might, it's not new. I mean, if it's broken, obviously we want to dispose of it, but if it's just slower, I mean, I know a couple of the 6th grade classrooms
That's a fair
would
point.
love extra
That's a fair point.
computers.
We'll check on that. I like that.
I don't want to jump on the back of that. I was going to make a similar comment / question. I was just wondering, is there any way that we can, do we do anything to sell this stuff, or how does
Yeah,
that work?
well, usually, there are two types of equipment you dispose of. This is technology. And so I have to be honest with you. I don't check, I don't ask the technology director, how about Dell Tower serial number this,
No, I wonder what the protocol is.
Okay, in general, no one wants it. Okay? And ours, how can I say this delicately? The stuff that we get rid of tends to be way older than the stuff that other people get rid of. That's the best way I could say it, okay? So I don't think there's any market for what we're trying to get rid of. I mean, these Dells are probably double-digit years old. That'd be my guess. But, I hear you. I don't want to be dumping, stuff on anybody who doesn't want it, but I think that's fair. But I'll ask David Rogers, who's the Director of Technology, about that, okay?
Yeah, I know him and Sandy, they always watch stuff.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have the luxury of, getting
Yeah.
much, but we'll double check, I promise.
Great. Any other questions on the consent calendar? Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second? Great, all in favor? Aye. Great, and then we had a closed session earlier regarding 2 expulsions. And so in open session, we need to take action on that. So if we can approve or the expulsions discussed in the closed session?
I move approval of the expulsions.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, and this is the most exciting part of every meeting. We're adjourned.
There you go.
Until next time, thank you so much for being here.